How to Be Awesome at Your Job is sponsored by LinkedIn Jobs. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/beawesome. That's linkedin.com/BEAWESOME.
The main reason people don't change is they're stuck in the planning cycle. The meeting about the meeting, the report about the report. They're gathering data. They're getting no real feedback from the world. So what you do is you hedge. Stop trying to figure everything out yourself. Start calling other people. Start bringing other people in who have different ideas than you do.
That's Jeff DeGraff. He's a top academic speaker, professor at the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business, and founder of the Innovatrium Institute of Innovation. His clients and colleagues have dubbed him the Dean of Innovation. His new book, The Art of Change, Transforming Paradoxes into Breakthroughs, shares how true innovation and change comes from embracing contradictions. So you'll learn 1, why facts don't actually change minds and what does. 2, why you should seek out constructive conflict. And 3, what to do when you're overwhelmed with choice. And if you want a quick summary write-up of these actionable takeaways, I recommend you drop on by awesomeatyourjob.com and sign up for the free Gold Nugget email newsletter there. I'm Pete Mikitis. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job. And now, here's Jeff. Jeff, welcome back.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I'm excited to chat, and I'd love to hear, since we last chatted 8 years ago, what's one of the most fascinating things you've discovered about us humans and change in that time?
1, that we're hypocrites, starting with me. We know how things work, but it's sort of like knowing you need to lose a little weight, but we don't want to do that. And then sort of really using that to our advantage and kind of working through our own resistance to help not only ourselves change, but other people.
Intriguing. So we're hypocrites in the world of change. What's one of the top ways that we are hypocritical?
Well, all of us know, because we're on social media, that facts don't change minds. And yet, whenever we're trying to change, what's the first thing we do? We use facts, right? So it's a paradox. It's one of the first paradoxes in the book. And the challenge is, even though we know it, we still do it because it's habitual.
That's intriguing. Well, we're going to go in all kinds of fun directions. But while we're here, okay, Jeff laid on us. If facts don't change minds, what does?
Experiences. One of the things I worked on during COVID, I worked on the acquisition process for the COVID vaccine. So I've got a letter of marque from Congress and one of the few people that was called in to try and work on this. And what was really interesting to me was when we started looking at the data, and this is not a political comment. This is just a comment about how powerful beliefs are. Depends on whether you look at the Johns Hopkins data or the Brown University data. The first million people who died, either somewhere between 25 and 40% of the people who died had a vaccine available to them. Meaning people would rather die than change their mind. That's how powerful that is. I'm not trying to be a provocateur. And I'm not trying to make a political statement. I'm trying to say that's what belief systems do. And the whole challenge of that is that the only thing that really changes minds is experiences. Experiences change minds. So you've had something happen, you learned from it. Now you have a different point of view. Learning and innovation and change are all sort of inextricably interrelated. So that becomes the big thing. How do we help people get those experiences? What I mean by that is ask your listeners to think about a bell curve. At one end of the bell curve, there's a crisis, and the other end of the bell curve, there's exceptional, or you're doing really well. Think about when people really change. They lose their job, they lose their health, they get a divorce. And the reason they change at the edge of the bell curve is the risk of trying something radical. And the reward of staying where you're at is reversed at the edge of a bell curve. The same is true when you're on a roll. When everything's working, you got promoted, you graduated, you're in love, whatever it is. So the thing that people get wrong is it's not the 80-20 rule. That's a terrible rule for change. It's the opposite of what change is. It's the 20-80 rule. And what that means is it's easier to change 20% of your life 80% than it is to change 80% of your life 20%. Let me repeat that. It's easier to change 20% of your life 80% than it is to change 80% of your life 20%. What you have to understand is that change is almost always going to happen when there's an inflection point, a crisis or exceptional. And part of the reason that I think people changed during COVID was that 2080 rule. There was a crisis. They had to, right? When it ended, then everybody went back to their own finger pointing and yelling at each other. But during it, that's the galvanizing piece, the inflection event.
And I think that's interesting when you talk about the crisis is on one side and on a roll is on the other. I'm thinking about how it could also happen in a good way, and it's still an experience. And this is so mundane, but I'll say it. So I am all about cold plunging now. And it used to be when I saw these expensive cold plunge device like tubs and all like the hip, sexy Instagram influencers, plugging it, I was like, oh, brother, if it works, maybe, I don't know. Second, it's like ancient and we've found a way to make this really expensive and monetize it. So I had all kinds of skepticism, but I saw a scientific paper, which sounded very compelling in terms of like dopamine release, whatever. And I had the experience like, well, let's just put some ice in a bathtub. It doesn't cost much. See what happens. And I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing.
You've hit the nail on the head here, Pete, about something really important. The main reason people don't change is they're stuck in the planning cycle. The meeting about the meeting, the report about the report. They're gathering data. They're getting no real feedback from the world. So what you do is you hedge. All you got to do is pay attention to kind of how the COVID vaccine got developed or anything else. Meaning you give things very little money and very little time and you spread them out and you make them radical. So you did a radical experiment. You said, let's go down and get some ice, put it in the bathtub. It cost you very little money. If it didn't work, you would have got out of the bathtub. That would have been the end of it. And you probably had 3 or 4 other experiments after that. You probably tried different kinds of devices, or you talked to people who are athletes and what they did with cold plunge. And you talked to the Finns and how they did it from sauna, right? So you probably had some pieces in there before you decided that this was really the thing for you. And that's how most of us actually do it. The people who say go big or go home, what I'm delighted about is most of them go home. They're obnoxious. It doesn't work that way. And if it did, you got lucky.
Okay. So you're saying sprinkling a little bit of resource in a lot of places and see where something radical happens. Can you give us a work example of that?
Yeah. So let's say that I'm a nurse and I really want to start a bakery. So what I'm going to do, rather than I'm going to plan for 5 years and then I'm going to quit being a nurse and try and buy a bakery and then I'm going to fail. You hear these all the time. What I'm going to do is instead, I'm going to try my Italian grandmother's tiramisu. And I'm going to go to 3 different kinds of restaurants. I'm going to go to an Italian restaurant, a Mexican restaurant, and a German restaurant. And I'm going to see if they'll sell a little bit of this tiramisu. So I'm going to take the risk of maybe making some of this up. What I'm going to find out is that the Italian restaurant doesn't want it. The German restaurant has a different name for it, but they actually like it. And the Mexican restaurant actually really likes it, but they'd like some differences to it. So in the next round, you get rid of the Italian restaurant. Now you're trying the other 2 restaurants and you stumble onto something that makes your tiramisu radically different. You put cayenne pepper or something. I don't know. I'm not a cook. You put something radically different in it and it starts to catch on. So what happens is think about it like a funnel, right? What you're trying to do at the top of the funnel is not only see how wide you can go with experiments, but you're also trying to mitigate risk. You're trying to manage risk and you're trying to accelerate failure. And the reason you're doing that is you're getting real information from the world and very quickly you're drawing down. You don't have to have money or have a big thing like a COVID vaccine. You could just be trying to sell tiramisu. But you've got to hedge at the beginning. You've got to get real information from the market before you draw down.
Okay, understood. Well, so in your book, The Art of Change, Transforming Paradoxes into Breakthroughs, you lay out 7 paradoxes of change. I'd love to hear a quick rundown of what they are. But first, tell us what makes them paradoxes.
Well, I think most of us in modernity are living in this world where things are either incongruous, antithetical, or most importantly, ambiguous. And we do know going back to the 40s, there was 2 very famous scientists, one called E. Paul Torrance, the other called Calvin Wilson. And they started studying highly creative people. And this was really kind of for the Korean War, that kind of period, the Vietnam War. And what they noticed was very creative people had a high tolerance for ambiguity. And what that meant was that they had a highly adaptive mindset. They were able to kind of make it up as they go along. Well, one of the big challenges in modernity, I believe, Pete, is that strategy is dead. And more people are trying to go to futuring. Again, God bless them. But the truth of the matter is events and technology is now moving faster than strategy does. Ask yourself this. How many people in their 2019 plan had a pandemic? Well, pandemics have been around since Thucydides, Herodotus. They were in the Bible, right? How many had that there'd be a Russian invasion of Europe? How many had, right? Go down the list of these events, and almost no one had them.
Yeah.
So the issue becomes planning has become obsolete. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. During COVID, all the big tech companies were not prepared for what happened. Remember the first day of COVID, Microsoft Teams collapsed. And yet there was this small company, Zoom, that didn't have a great strategy, but was highly agile. This makes sense? And they won the day. So we're now in this era of strategic thinking as opposed to just strategic planning, right? And yes, we have to try and predict the future, but we should all look at the future like it's Jell-O. There's a lot of things we don't know about the future. How fast things are moving and the magnitude is an inflection point where people love to talk about that, Pete. They love to say, this is the greatest period of change, and I'm very skeptical. You're living in Europe during the Crusades. They march back through your village in France and 3/4 of your village dies, the infidels at the door, or that's the human condition. But we are going through this sort of punctuated piece where, and it's not, I don't think it's going to be AI that drives everybody crazy. I think it's what AI allows us to do. It's going to change power generation big time. It's going to change biology. What's everybody going to do now that we've mapped all 200 million proteins in the genome, right? We're pretty close to figuring out how to build a person, right? So the notion is the whole idea of we've got a handle on this. I think we have to say we don't. I think we have to say we're making it up as we go along.
I think that is so wise. And I think about that as I watch the pundits say what will happen with AI. It's like, you don't know. You don't know. And I guess that's what I find. Here's my little joke, Jeff. Maybe you could appreciate it. It doesn't get many laughs when I share it with my friends. But here it goes, Jeff. Obviously, overconfidence is the most destructive force in the universe. Okay, thank you. But I believe it. We don't know, but we say we know. And because we act with such confidence when we ought not to, we get ourselves into some trouble.
We sure do. And that's particularly true for change and innovation. These are what we call convex forms of value, which means they pay in the future, for which we have no data, right? So the interesting thing is when you got to know who actually knows. And that doesn't mean you went to school. That you can, if you want to know about raising children, talk to a woman who's got 5 of them. You want to know about how to fix your toilet, talk to a plumber. Right? The notion is somebody who has experience with it, somebody who has real trade, what I call trade craft, right? They understand how things work. That's why for my 36 years here at Michigan, I've always had a very active portfolio of building companies and trying to turn things around. Because theories of practice don't come from theories. They come from practice. They come from getting dirty. You have to. Otherwise, you don't really understand it. Surgeons have to do surgery. Engineers have to build machines. Business school professors, my belief, should build businesses. That's what we do. And it's kind of vocational. I know it sounds terrible, but it is kind of vocational. It's a how-to kind of thing.
No, understood. Okay. Well, so let's hear some of these paradoxes.
So one of my favorite paradoxes is that we seek to change others, but we can only change ourselves. And I start the book with this interesting story. I learned this as a young man. I had a girlfriend in college named Katie. She was really pretty and really smart, and I liked her. I came to college as a wrestler. So, I'm training all the time. And, I wasn't bad, but I wasn't as good as maybe I could have been. And Katie was a chain smoker. So every time I would see her, it always felt like my training was being undone because she just smoked a lot of cigarettes. So you do the 3 things that everybody does. You start out with trying to inform her. So you show her the Surgeon General stuff, you show her the reports. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. Next thing you do is you try and be charming. You try and really get Katie to. So I was doing some work in New York City and really invited her to go with me to New York with the caveat that she couldn't, in the hotel room, couldn't smoke the whole time, or I'd have to go out and smoke. She passed. You didn't want to do that. And of course, the third thing you go through is what everybody does. Well, if you're going to smoke like this, maybe this relationship isn't what I think it is. And you can imagine she dumped me, right? So I tried all the things that you try to change another person. None of it worked. Well, there's a postscript to it. Around graduation time, I was in a grocery store and I ran into her and I noticed she wasn't smoking. So I had to ask, Pete, why aren't you smoking? And she said, I met a guy. So I felt about 2 inches tall. And then she said, he never pressured me. He just really loved me and I started to love myself. And so I decided that I would quit smoking. I decided it was really good for me to quit smoking. Well, here's the moral of the story. The moral of the story was this guy, who was obviously quite a bit smarter than I was, had created a situation where he was very supportive to her. And she kind of figured things out for herself, right? Because you can't change other people. And that's one of the big things that people do all the time in these change books. They're about how to use bonuses or how to use fear. Those things don't last and they don't really work. So the question becomes, how do you get to understand a person in a deep way, understand what they really want, understand how they really function, and put them in a situation where they can correct their own behavior, assuming that you want that to happen. And then they have a choice, whether they make the change or not, right? And some changes are really hard to make and some are easy. If you're talking about skill or things like showing up on time at the office, those are relatively easy. If you're talking about, how people handle stress or whatever, those are harder and those are things that you probably need some professional help for.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So how about the second paradox?
Well, I think one of the other ones that I really like is we set goals for change, but the goals for change with the change. So people get really upset. We do this big program for the United States Air Force. And one of the things that we start out with is to say, what's your challenge statement? It's usually somebody who's a commanding officer is given a challenge. Well, we say, that's great. That's what everybody thinks the problem is now. But the truth of the matter is you're going to start turning over rocks, talking to people. You can start running experiments. And what you're going to find out very quickly in 2 weeks, if you're really doing this, you're going to find out that's not the problem at all. You're going to find out it's a different problem. Anybody who's ever worked on their house gets this. There's a leak in your house. You get an Allen wrench and you go up and you go downstairs and you turn the wrench and that leak stops and you feel good. And then the next day, the leak happens in the bathroom upstairs and it's much more active and you're not sure what that is. So you try and watch a YouTube video and figure that out. And then what happens is you figure that out and the next day, the pantry is flooded and you have to call a plumber. And everybody who owns a home has had this experience. Well, the challenge is the problem wasn't the problem. And it almost never is. It's the same thing when people, they go to WebMD and they go to somebody who spent, they spent 4 years in medical school and have medical certificates, which another 4 years. They'll come in and say, this is what's wrong with me. And inevitably, most of the time, it's just a symptom of something that's more endemic. So the change changes with the change. So that means you have to get rid of X marks the spot. You have to start thinking of yourself like you're a scout, like you're constantly looking for disconfirming information. Where is it that I've tried something and it's not working? So the confirming information doesn't help. All your friends on Facebook who like you are not going to help you get to the next place. The people who are going to help you get to the next place are people who have different ideas than you do. They have constructive conflict. Constructive is the key word here, constructive. They love you, they care about you, they want to help you get there, but they don't agree with you. Those are the best people in the world to have around you.
Okay, so we have an overarching theme associated with be emergent and see what happens and then go where the trail is leading you. Find the disconfirming information, solve the real problem and not sort of the upfront stated problem and change and flow and roll with it. At the same time, we humans sure don't care for this uncertainty business, Jeff. So
I'm a total hypocrite.
Okay.
I hate change.
All right.
I drive the same car I've driven for 15 years. My wife says, get a new car. People will think you're not doing okay. I'm like, no, I like this car. I sit in the same seats in the stadium I've sat in for 40 years. I don't like change. I need your listeners to understand I don't like it either, right? Incidentally, some of the best innovators I know don't like innovation either. I don't buy new stuff, right? Most of the stuff that's new, I look at it and go, it's not a game changer. So I'm not that guy. So the first thing is nobody likes to change. And there's two modalities of change. I can tell you how I get through it. If it becomes I have to change something that I've got, I'm in a reactive position. I don't like doing that. That's when you tell somebody about your new idea, but it's not their new idea. They're going to tell you everything's wrong with it because you've left them in a reactive position, right? This is the problem with change. Somebody goes, I hate your change plan. And what people forget is the next question should be, okay, good point. What would you do? Because that one question takes you from a reactive position to you now have to participate. You're not a proactive position. You have to show your hand. So what changes, and this is what I do, is I stop thinking about the past and I start thinking about what I want, right? Now, this is important about how people are going to do it. Now, one is, how do we do this without being uncomfortable? We don't. We become uncomfortable. You have to make that normative. How do you deal with it at work when there's conflict? Well, you have to keep the conflict constructive. I want to repeat this. Anybody's ever worked on a great team knows everybody doesn't agree, but you want to be safe. You want to feel safe, right? But the notion is ideas are in play. So if you feel safe, you feel comfortable back and forth about ideas, right? Which is important. So it's the creative power of constructive conflict, not destructive. It's hard to keep that in front of you between the buoys. Now, what's important about this? People who just kind of make it up as they go along seldom accomplish anything. So you have to have a North Star. But what you're doing is like navigating. You're constantly correcting to that North Star. And as the North Star maybe looks differently, depending on what hemisphere you're in, et cetera, you have to make those adjustments. It doesn't mean that you're rudderless. It doesn't mean that you're going just anywhere. It's not improvisation. It means that the road to it is going to be circuitous. That's the first piece. Second piece, the place in which you almost always want to start your journey is a place where the current situation seems intolerable. And that doesn't mean it's difficult. It could be you feel stuck. Could feel in your career like, I was trained as a doctor. I'm now 50 years old. I've been a doctor for X amount of years. I think I've done as much as I can as a doctor. I'm stuck. So that's a place where because risk and reward there is reversed, you're going to try stuff. You're going to be willing to try stuff. Remember, hedging. The third thing, nobody makes the journey alone. I'm so tired of the self-help stuff about here's how you're going to do it alone. Nobody gets there alone. We all get there with other people. And if the other people who are with you all agree with you, you're probably not going to get there because you've added no skill, no wayfinding, nothing that you have on your own. So you need to find people who follow the same North Star, or people really care about you and love you, but are different than you. Sort of think about like your mom. Your mom, hopefully in your life was very supportive. Maybe your dad too, right? Hopefully was very supportive. Really liked the stuff that you did. But didn't they also provide some real differences in views than you had about things that maybe you needed to do? It doesn't mean that mom or dad were always right, but it means that they probably had your best interest at heart.
Yes. Okay. Good. Thank you. All right. So it's just going to be uncomfortable. Just is. And so we have to learn to deal with that constructive conflict. Any thoughts in terms of our own internal emotional management? Any mantras or practices?
I do. I think that the issue is you have to be able to take a higher point of view about your life. And again, I am not an evolved being. I have the same problems your listeners are going to have with this. But I think about it this way. Think about it like one of the big contemporary issues that we have is the freedom of choice paradox. We can make I talk to people all the time. I spend a lot of my year abroad. I'm one of those guys that's coming up on 3 million miles on Delta Airlines alone, right? So I'm in a lot of different parts of the world. Well, somebody made a comment to me recently in Asia, and they said, it's really funny to me. America's one of the freest places in the world, but nobody acts like they're free. And I went, yeah, that's true, right? Because unlimited freedom to do whatever you think, within morality and within the law is scary, right? So the one hand, you like that you have all that freedom, but on the other hand, you don't want all that freedom because it's kind of overwhelming the responsibility you have for your life, right? So
Mhm.
that becomes kind of a paradox. So one of the things I think we have to do in modern life is to take a higher point of view, which would mean what's best for me, what's best for my family, my community. What's the balance I'm looking for in here? How do I work through that we're free, but too much freedom brings too much responsibility, and that might be overwhelming to me. So it's like gauging. It's like gauging how much sweetness do you want in your coffee? Are you a one Splenda person? Are you three Splenda? I don't know. You have to figure that out.
Well, that's just really an intriguing, provocative statement from your friend in Asia there. Americans are so free, and yet we don't act like it. What are some of the top ways that Americans do not take advantage of their freedoms? It's like, hey, you could do this, but you never do. It'd probably be good and wonderful for you.
People vote one party, typically vote that party all their life. People who belong to one religion belong to it. People who drive to work usually take the same route to work. People like a certain type of music, seldom move to a different station or to a different streaming service than they like. People have a tendency to want to feel comfortable, which is, of course, part of the human condition, right? But they have the freedom to change all of that. And often they don't. And I come back to, you have to pay attention to when people change and why they change. And this is an important part about the book. I'm looking at this from a situational standpoint. So this is not a Myers-Briggs test. I'm an ENTP or an INFJ. Okay, that's great. It's important. Isabel Briggs Myers actually was from here in Ann Arbor, right? But here's the issue. Think of it like it's a bull market or a bear market. If it's a bull market and you're a bear trader, you're not going to make any money. If it's a bear market and you're a bull trader, you're going to lose your butt, right? You have to trade according to what the market is. If you like football, is it a running down, a passing down? Are we playing offensive? Pick whatever it is. There's a situation in which a certain skill is optimized. And this is true for old professors too. There are periods of time when being the change and innovation professor is like, oh, well, now everybody calls. But then what'll happen 5 years from now when everything kind of settles, no one will call. Well, that's because it's not, this makes sense. It's not my situation, right? So what people have to understand is that they have to fit within the system. Families have it, companies have it, churches have it, right? Understand who you are, what character you are in that movie.
And so then it sounds like you're not saying, hey, find what way the wind is blowing and then rock and roll with it, so much as accept that this is your time, this is not your time.
And adjust to where you can adjust. I think everybody, like companies, they used to, C.K. Prahalad, the late great C.K. Prahalad, of course, coined the term core competencies. I think the same is true for people. And C.K. would famously say, is it valuable, rare, difficult to imitate, and are you organized for it? Right? What he called VRIO. Is it valuable, rare, difficult to imitate, and you're organized for it? I think the same is true for people. I think most of us have one or two things that we're really good at. And even though the situation changes, how do we use that one or two things? Because they'll be useful. But how do we use it in that situation? And what frustrates people is they'll say, I used to be really great at this, and then the situation changed. I'm like, yeah, it does. And again, that's outside change. None of us like that. I don't like it either. The inside change is I've been doing this for a long time. I want to grow. And this is the fundamental tension, Pete, below everything. Just like people, organizations have two states. They have a state of sustainability and they have a state of growth. In an organization, the state of sustainability is basically management, and the state of growth is change and innovation. Change and innovation, by definition, is a form of deviance, hopefully positive deviance. It's negative too. I mean, wars create innovation, I'm sorry to say. But the notion is the whole idea of being the same and growing is not just a style issue. It's a fundamental issue about values. So think of it this way. You have a small company, you're trying to be really efficient. So you keep track of everything and you're really a hawk on top of everything. That's great. There's no resources or no opportunity for somebody to explore a new market because that's the opposite. You have to have Slack resources to do that. You have to have non-accountable resources to do that, right? And what happens is these small companies will say, what we're going to do is we're going to innovate, and we're going to innovate under the kind of efficiencies that we normally do. And what they get is they get product improvements, et cetera, and they get left behind by the companies that basically say, this is a different season now. Now we're going to try and get into something new.
Understood. Thank you. Okay. Well, before we hear about some of your favorite things, I'd love it if you have any final top do's or don'ts when it comes to change.
Yeah, I think my big top do when it comes to change is understand the limits of what you actually know and understand where your blind spots are. Know who does actually know. Stop trying to figure everything out yourself. Start calling other people. Start bringing other people in who have different ideas than you do. I know I do this all the time because the way in which I build these change teams is they're very cognitively diverse and they're different. They're very diverse in the skill sets that they've got. And that's really important. Now, people will say, but we share a common culture. I'm not even sure that's required. I think what's required is you have fond regard for each other and you have a similar goal, right? So the notion is you're not trying to destroy anybody or whatever. You're basically understanding that they have commensurate skills that you have. The other thing that I think is really very important is that the paradox you're looking for, the things that seem incongruous to you, it's not that this is a element of change. It is the change. It is the change. So think about what's going on right now globally with AI. Think about this for just a minute. Think about the sustainability paradox. Here's the paradox. In order to get to the kind of devices we need to have a low footprint, almost, low emissions, we're going to need a lot of artificial intelligence in all different areas, right? On the other hand, in order to have artificial intelligence, it basically drinks energy. It's a huge energy. It consumes a large amount of energy. So it's not that we need a change. The change is in the paradox. The change is implicit in how do we get to the next place without destroying the planet in the next place. Now let's bring this down to a listener, so it's not so highfalutin, right? Somebody's got a company that they're trying to run. It's a small company. You got a electrical. You got a company that does electrical wiring, and you've got a bunch of high schools in your community that you wire, and you keep track of the all that's going on. And what goes on is you've got contracts, but because of federal laws, all of a sudden the cost of the wire that you're putting everywhere, or the whatever we're using these days, right? Because of the cost of doing that has gone up exponentially. You're going to go bankrupt if you keep doing things the way you're doing it. So your paradox is, how do I keep the business and keep myself at the center of this, right? Using new technology and maintaining cost containment. So I've got an innovation piece and I've got an efficiency piece that I have to do at the same time. So think about this. So somebody's going to find out that there's devices that basically can, move energy in different ways, or there's different ways of routing energy in different ways. And you got to go back to school and maybe hire a couple different people. Maybe you have to lay off a couple people. But it's in the paradox itself that the success of the change exists. The paradox is not a sidebar. It's not something along the way. It's fundamental.
So if that's the case, then what are we doing wrong if we fail to acknowledge that?
So the issue becomes, even in our own life, how do we get to the next place before we're required to get to the next place? And again, I come back to get out of a reactive position. Once you're in a reactive position, it's what you're trying to not make happen. Get into a proactive position saying, what should it be? Is this an opportunity for career change? Is this an opportunity to write that novel you wanted? Is this an opportunity to semi-retire? There's a whole bunch of freedom in the middle of this that I think people could take advantage of. And we have to get out of this either or thinking.
Big thanks to Jeff for sharing his wisdom with us. And big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsor to check out is Strawberry.me Career Coaching. Having real clarity and direction can make or break your career. If it seems like you're putting in the work but not seeing your career take off, some coaching might be just the ticket. Strawberry.me matches you with certified career coaches who help you gain clarity on what you really want next in your career, develop a results-driven strategy, and stay accountable. And they can also help you flourish beyond career issues. I had a fantastic session with my coach, Brett, about handling stress from so many responsibilities in so many areas. He was fun. He was wise. He just really got me. We had some laughs and a good time and a good rapport. And he gave me an exercise that has been so quick and so effective for me. I've been doing it every day. So if you're ready to take control and build momentum in your career, go to strawberry.me/awesome to claim your $50 credit. That's strawberry.me/awesome. Because awesome careers don't just happen, you make them happen. One sponsor to check out is Quince. Quince helps you save a bundle on basics. They have high-quality fabrics, classic fits, and lightweight layers for warm weather at prices that just make sense. Everything I've ordered from Quince has been solid and about half the cost of similar brands. Quince works directly with top artisans and cuts out the middleman to provide big savings. I'm personally particularly impressed with their cashmere. It's so solid and cozy with prices that are just about the best in the world compared to anything I've seen anywhere else. So keep it classic and cool with long-lasting staples from Quince. Go to quince.com/awesome for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/awesome to get free shipping and 365-day returns. One more time, that's quince.com/awesome. One sponsor to check out is Plod. Plod is great for running meetings more efficiently and productively, especially on crazy busy days. Plod Note is a credit card-sized AI gadget attachable to the back of your phone. Whether you're having business calls or in-person meetings, it can be your ultimate business assistant. The gadget records audio, and the app automatically creates transcripts, summarizes key points, and even provides mind maps to visualize everything. You can talk and brainstorm with it even because the AI doesn't just take the notes, but also understands them. Plod has been trusted by over 700,000 buyers globally, and more than 200,000 managers and leaders are using it every day to save time and improve collaboration. If you're ready to take your meeting to the next level, type PLAUD into Google and get a 10% off discount with my code AWESOME. It's slim, gorgeous, and cool. And that website again is Plod, spelled PLAUD. Okay. Well, now could you share with us a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
I love Bertrand Russell's quote, which we now see everywhere. The whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are so certain of themselves, and wiser people so full of doubts. I hope your listeners are like me. I am full of doubts.
Okay.
I think that's the only way to go through life.
And a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite experiments is going back to a sort of a classic one, which is the prison experiment at Stanford, and how people, when they're around other people, have a tendency to defer their moral judgment. And I think there's a lot of that goes on in the world.
Okay. And a favorite book?
I love a book by Heinrich Schimowski, as I think how you say his last name. He wrote a book called The Participatory Mind. And I love the book. And it's kind of weird. It's almost new agey. But what he's basically saying in the book, which I think is so important, is that our thinking is largely informed by the world around us, and we largely inform that as well. And there's a whole kind of, philosophy behind this called emergence philosophy, if your listeners are interested in this whole idea. But it basically means that we can never really transcend our world. We have to live in it. And, we can imagine what the world's like beyond this world or whatever, whatever you believe about the world, but you're still in the fishbowl. And so the good news is you're a fish and you have some agency. The bad news is you're in a fishbowl and you can't get out of the fishbowl.
Okay. And a favorite habit?
Yes. Napping. Every day after lunch, I lock the door and turn the lights out. And I don't have to have an alarm or anything. I nap for 20 minutes and I feel completely different.
All right. And is there a key nugget you share, a Jeff original that really seems to resonate and connect with folks?
Yeah. Nobody cares about your innovation. They care about you solving their problem. Nobody cares about your innovation. So stop showing it to them. Show it how it solves their problem. Everybody reads their own horoscope first.
And if folks want to learn more, get in touch, where'd you point them?
Well, number one, I would go to LinkedIn. So I'm one of the original LinkedIn influencers. So go to LinkedIn, look up Jeff DeGraff and connect. The other thing is I would go to theartofchange.net, which has all of the stuff about the new book, and I would go to jeffdegraff.com. That would be probably the easiest way to reach me.
All right. And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
I do. My final call of action would be what I call the democratization of innovation. And that is, I think we think about our own selves and what we're doing. I would say apprentice somebody. If you're an innovator out there, apprentice someone. I'm very much concerned that kind of the way I came up in America, right, behind these kind of grizzled old innovators, who'd been through the war and all this stuff, we learned to be great that way. I think we're missing some of that. We're missing some of that human connection, somebody who's got some trade skills, somebody's got some trade crap about changing innovation. Find somebody who's the next generation, who's going to carry the torch beyond your generation, because that's what matters. It's what we do to keep us moving forward, all of us moving forward.
All right. Jeff, thank you.
Pete, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Good seeing you again.
I love so much of what Jeff has to say about don't just plan, have a meeting about the meeting, the report about the report, but rather get a little something out there so you get the real feedback from the world and iterate and make it better, better, better from there. So much good stuff from Jeff. If you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we've referenced, please drop on by awesomeatyourjob.com/EP1084. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.